You've sent maybe 100,000 messages, typed millions of words, never once asked why these 6 letters sit exactly where they sit. QWERTY. Here's what you think you know. The keyboard was scrambled to slow you down, so the metal keys wouldn't jam. That story is wrong. All of it. What's actually under your fingers is a 150-year-old accident, and it begins with dead telegraph code you are still typing today. By the end, you'll know why your S sits where it sits, why a gun company locked it in forever, why the keyboard built to beat it never stood a chance. Because here's the real mystery. You're holding a sheet of glass with nothing inside it to jam, so why does it still show you QWERTY? Two researchers in Kyoto spent years digging out the real story, so let's start where they did. Not with a writer, with a wire. It's 1868, in a Milwaukee print shop. A newspaperman named Christopher Latham Sholes, a man who spent his whole life setting other people's words in ink, is building a machine that writes by itself. But his machine does not look like yours. It looks like a piano, 2 long rows, 28 keys, A, B, C, D, tidy, logical. The exact opposite of the keyboard you own. But watch who buys the very first one, in November 1868, not an author, a telegraph college, because this machine wasn't built to write. It was built to listen, to catch Morse code racing down a wire and turn dots and dashes into letters, fast. So the keyboard under your fingers didn't begin with words on a page, it began with a signal on a wire. Hold on to that. It's about to explain everything, now. That famous story, the one about jamming keys, let's deal with it, because almost everyone believes it. The textbook version, the metal type bars clashed, so they scattered the common letters to slow your fingers down, clean, memorable. But one encyclopedia flatly calls that explanation possibly invented, or even incorrect. The Kyoto researchers go further. Sholes, they say, never set out to slow anyone down, so if it wasn't jams, try to beat the researchers to it. Look at the bottom left of your keyboard, Z then S right beside it, E sitting just above. Guess why those 3 of all 26 letters ended up huddled together? I'll give you a second. Here's the scene. A telegraph operator taking down a message live. The sounder clicks, and in American Morse, the signal for Z sounds almost exactly like S followed by E. No rewind, no second chance. Which one was it? He can't know until the rest of the word arrives. So he needs S, E, and Z under the same fingers, ready to strike whichever it turns out to be. That's why they're huddled. Not to prevent a jam, to untangle a sound. And here's the detail that shatters the old story for good. E and R, one of the most common letter pairs in all of English, were deliberately shoved right next to each other. If you were spreading letters apart to stop jams, that's the last thing you'd do. But for an operator chasing Morse, it's exactly right. Now, it's a reconstruction, not a confession. Even the researchers admit the full origin isn't settled. But every clue they found points away from jams and straight at the telegraph. And once you start fact-checking the famous stories, another one falls apart. The top row spells typewriter, so a salesman could peck out the brand? The letters really are up there. Check it. But the salesman is a myth too. The brand name was locked in before those keys ever moved. The odds of the row lining up by chance? About 2 in 10,000. Sometimes the universe just enjoys a good prank, which still leaves the big one. An accident this messy? How did it take over the entire planet? The answer is a gun company. In 1873, Sholes sold his patent rights for $12,000 to Remington, a firm that, until then, mostly made rifles. Remington shipped the machine in 1874, but it caught fire in 1878, when the number 2 added a shift key, capitals and lowercase on one machine. By 1891, more than 100,000 Remington QWERTY machines were clacking away, and every rival maker copied the layout, just to sell to the people who already knew it. If the idea that a rifle company accidentally standardized the entire planet itches your brain, good. That's this whole channel. Subscribe and stick around, because here's where the story gets strange. The real lock didn't snap shut in a factory, it snapped shut in people. They learned to touch type, and the layout stopped living in the machine and started living in millions of trained hands. Typing schools turned out clerks by the thousand, each one fluent in one layout and one only. Retraining them all would cost a fortune, therefore nobody ever did. In 1985, the economist Paul David gave the trap its textbook name, path dependence. The world locks onto the first thing that works, then can never afford to leave. And buried in that famous paper is a joke history plays on everyone. The very study that made QWERTY the symbol of being stuck repeated the jam story and the salesman story as fact. Even the experts couldn't escape a good story. Which brings us to the question I promised you. If something genuinely better came along, we'd switch, wouldn't we? In 1932, a man named August Dvorak built exactly that, a layout engineered scientifically for speed, patented in 1936. The claims around it were enormous. A wartime Navy study said retraining a typist on Dvorak paid for itself in just 10 days, a return north of 2,000%. It became the famous proof that we're all stuck with something worse. 10 days, 2,000%. If that number makes you squint, keep squinting. Because pull the study apart and you find its author, the Navy's top time and motion expert, a lieutenant commander by the name of August Dvorak, the same man who owned the patent. When a researcher with no keyboard to sell finally reran the test, the government's own study, in 1956, the magic vanished, no real advantage at all. In 1990, the economists Leibowitz and Margolis combed every careful experiment they could find. Their verdict, Dvorak was maybe 2 to 6% faster, barely measurable. The vastly better rival was a myth of its own. And that's the real twist. QWERTY isn't a villain that crushed a hero. There was no hero. It's just good enough, and good enough, it turns out, is unkillable. So look down at your phone again. Glass. No bars, no springs, nothing that can physically jam anywhere inside it. And it still shows you QWERTY. We rebuilt a 150-year-old accident in software for the one device on Earth that had every reason to start clean. The better-ish option is sitting in your settings right now, switched off. It's been there for years. You will never turn it on. Neither will the rest of the world. Because the lock isn't in the machine anymore. It's in you. Your fingers can find the quick brown fox in the dark, and that muscle memory is the reason the whole planet can never change its mind. QWERTY. 6 letters in an order nobody chose, shaped by telegraph clerks listening to a wire, sold by a rifle factory, and now living quietly in your hands. You're not just stuck with the accident, you're how it survives. And once you've seen one, an accident hiding in plain sight, running the world, you start seeing them everywhere. Take the 7-day week. Nothing in the sky marks it. Nobody can fully explain the 7, and every empire that tried to replace it failed. Same story as your keyboard. A made-up rhythm we can't put down. That one's on screen now. Go watch it.